All right, all right, all right, all right. This is Ross coming to you with another episode of The Rock Never Stops. Um, Today we are continuing in our series, My Favorite Thing About Your Favorite Team. Today we're going to be jumping in on the Portland Trailblazers. I'm going a little bit out of order. I had kind of wanted to do alphabetic, go through the whole thing, and that way you can kind of track what's coming up next, so you can see when your team is coming up. But I wanted to talk about the Portland Trailblazers because I think a lot of people have been critiquing their off season and the potential of this team. I think they've also been really. I think a lot of people have been jumping the gun in terms of how Portland needs to try to change this team around in order to be competitive. And so I'm going to give you some of my thoughts, tell you what I really, really like about this team, and see as a great potential opportunity in front of them. But without further ado, let's go ahead and dive on into the Portland Trailblazers. So my favorite thing about the Portland Trailblazers is their potential for a big three. Yusuf Nurkic. Yusuf Nurkic. 6'11", about a 7'4" wingspan, 270, 280 pounds. Great footwork, extremely strong, great touch, can pass the ball. It's almost like take Steven Adams and mix him with Jonas Valanciunas. Power, defense, with great touch and offensive skill set. Now, he's not somebody who's a Joel Embiid level. He's not that level of explosive athlete. Um, but he's right there in terms of talent, ability, uh, his his ability to play make, pass the ball, um, his ability to score around the rim, he's got the softest hands. Um, but I really feel like he has untapped potential. Um, and that's what I really want to touch on today. If you look at his career after he came to the Portland Trail Blazers, he got traded from the Denver Nuggets because basically the Nuggets had drafted Nurkic and Nikola Jokic, who was last year's MVP, and they had them side by side. And at first they were starting Nurkic because he was in better shape, and he had a great motor and just all the typical things that you want to see in a big man. But this cat Jokic kept coming off the bench and was like killing, right? And so they eventually decided we're going to go with Jokic, and so they traded Will Barton and Jusuf Nurkic, and that's how Nurkic got to the Portland Trailblazers. He immediately made an impact starting for them, and then the very next season he began to take off. He started averaging about 15 points a game, about 8 or 9 rebounds, about a block a game, really good efficiency. Then the season after that, he averaged 17 points a game, started shooting more threes on good percentages, and still rebounded at a high rate, over 10 rebounds a game, and over a block and a half a game, which is really good, really good. 17 and 10 with a block and a half. That's really good. That's really good. So the next year, everybody was expecting him to take the next leap, right? Well, just as he begins to, he gets hurt. All right. He only plays about 8 games. Oh, no, I'm sorry. He got hurt in the playoffs that year. He was doing really well, averaging about 17. And then he was he was out injured almost the entire season the following year. And he only ended up playing 8 games. Then the year after that was the whole bubble and everything. And his points per game average dropped down to about only 10 points a game. Now, this was kind of like a shock because I thought that they were going to really try to incorporate him into the team offense and really get him involved. But they kind of used him as like this kind of like a Steven Adams. And I'm not mad at Steven Adams. I don't diminish what his value is. But when you have a guy that can score 17 to 20 points a game, you don't just have him set screens and make passes. And I think that this was where uh, people got really upset with head coach Terry Stotts last season. He just really didn't maximize the roster, even having Carmelo Anthony, Robert Covington, um, what's his name, Derrick Jones Jr., who I thought was a really versatile player. Should have got more minutes, especially in the playoffs. You had Norman Powell starting instead of coming off the bench, which made them really dependent upon Anthony Simons, who wasn't ready. Um, and so you kind of see like this wasted opportunity last season for them to really push where there was an opening. I mean, Phoenix got all the way. And I wouldn't have said that Phoenix's roster was that much better than the Portland Trailblazers roster. So that was a big disappointment. Um, but this season, you got a new coach. You kind of got a fire lit under that team because Dame is like, look, either we're going to show we can get to the promised land or I got to go. And I respect him for that. I really do. But I think if Chauncey Billups, and this is kind of the crux of it, if Chauncey Billups can come into Portland and institute an offensive system that is centered around sharing the ball, making sure that everybody's touching it, everybody gets an opportunity to get their shots. Um, I think they're going to be better for it by the end of the season because they wouldn't have had to rely upon Damian Lillard and CJ McCollum so heavily throughout the regular season. So that by the time the playoffs start, not only are they a far more formidable team because you have multiple guys around them who are able to contribute, which makes them more dangerous, but it also keeps them fresh so that when it's time to take over, they've got it. But they also trust their teammates to step up and make big shots. And the other opposing defense is going to have to pay attention to them. So this is the big transition that I'm seeing them make. One, offensive system that includes everyone sharing the ball. I'm not saying Damian Lillard is selfish or CJ McCollum is a selfish player by any means, but I am saying that the system was very ball dominant, heavy on those two to make all the plays. And I think if they could begin to share the ball, especially with Yusuf Nurkic, get him in the post. I mean, look, the big man is back. The post game is back. Let's not get it twisted. You got DeAndre Ayton. You got Joel Embiid. You got a Nikola Jokic. You got Jonas Valanciunas. You got a Nikola Vucevic. You got all these big men out here who are doing work in the post. Julius Randle. Come on now. You got big men who are like, give me the ball and get out the way. And we're gonna have to begin to respect that aspect of the game, especially when it comes to close games, because yeah, it's good to hit threes. It's good to be able to, run and gun, shoot up a bunch of threes. Whether they say it's better to, it's more effective to hit 35% of threes than it is to hit, 40 something, 50% of twos, right? But when the playoffs start and games are close and players get tight, you want a high percentage shot. Efficiency beats everything. And in the playoffs and close games, the most efficient shot is the closest shot to the rim, a dunk or a layup. And when you've got a 6'11", 280-pound center who can move people around with his backside, like that is a huge advantage. And one they're going to have to definitely take advantage of, especially if they're going to go up against teams like the Lakers, who got Dwight Howard and AD down low. If you're going to go up against teams like Denver, if you're going to go up against teams like even New Orleans with Zion and Valanciunas, I mean, you're going to have some strong physical interior teams. And so you better be able to compete down there as well. But what I also like about what they did this offseason was they brought in some real veterans. Once again, if you refer back to my very first video, all right, on how you know if your team is really trying to win, one of the things that I pointed out was they bring in veterans. They have veterans. They don't rely upon young players. When you looked at the Milwaukee Bucks, what young player were they relying upon? No, can't think of one. DiVincenzo out of Villanova, maybe who's in his third year, fourth year, but he got hurt at the very beginning of the playoffs and didn't play the whole series, the whole playoffs, and they still won a championship. That wasn't who they were depending upon. They were depending upon veterans like PJ Tucker, Bobby Portis, Drew Holiday, Pat Connaughton. They were depending upon Brooke Lopez. Wow, what a career he's had, right? You look at Giannis Antetokounmpo. Like this is who they were relying upon, right? The Lakers the previous year when they won a championship, who were they depending upon that was young? They weren't saying, "Hey, if Taylor Horton Tucker has a big series, the Lakers can be dangerous." They weren't saying that. No, they have veterans. So when I see that the Portland Trailblazers finally brought in veterans like Norman Powell last season, hopefully comes off the bench as a sixth man. I think that's the best role for him, um, especially for this team to win and go deep. They need a Norman Powell who can get 25 minutes a game to 30 minutes a game and be a sixth man of the year candidate. That's what they really need out of him. Then you have guys like Tony Snell. All right, can't underestimate a 3-and-D veteran who knows where to be and has length. You look at who else they got? Cody Zeller. Cody Zeller was one of my most underrated pickups of this offseason. Cody Zeller is that dude where he's not really a starter, but if you have to start him in a pinch, you don't mind because he knows what to do. Plays great defense. He could play, make, pass the ball. Plays with great energy. Is always in the right place. Knows what you're doing. He's not going to cost you. But what he also does is he provides depth if Nurkic goes down for a little while. You don't all of a sudden have to go with an offensive-minded Enes Kanter who can't play any defense, and now your defensive efficiency just plummets, right? And then they picked up Larry Nance Jr. Now, Larry Nance Jr. to me, he is like in that Draymond Green mold, where he's literally the guy who can do a little bit of everything. And most importantly, he can spread the floor. He can spread the floor. He can shoot the three ball extremely well. And he rebounds. He defends at a high level. He's a great athlete, very unselfish, great playmaker. Once again, this is why I said they need to have an offensive system that's around sharing the ball because you've got so many guys who can pass that thing around and make sure that everyone touches it. And so when you have a Larry Nance Jr. and you still got Robert Covington, you got three really strong defenders in that starting lineup around CJ McCollum and Damian Lillard. So even if they're getting beat, they've got a lot of size behind them. And that's going to be really important. But then off the bench, you still got a guy like Ben McLemore who can just shoot it. Athletic guard, fly up and down the court, shooting it all day, right? And so if you got Norman Powell, uh, and Ben McLemore and Tony Snell and Cody Zeller coming off the bench, you don't have to be sitting there saying, "Hey, we hope Anthony Simons finally puts it all together and can be an NBA contributor." Because even if he does, he's not playoff tested, right? Norman Powell, he's NBA Finals tested and actually played pretty well against the Golden State Warriors in the NBA Finals. Been to the playoffs a bunch of times, right? Almost every season for the past maybe like 4 or 5 years, right? Norman Powell's been in the playoffs. Larry Nance Jr., right, is played under the big lights with the LA Lakers. He hasn't been playoff tested yet, but he's been there where he's been playing major minutes. And so then when you got guys like Cody Zeller as well, I think this is just a really strong team that's ready to make a deep run. And so I could go on, but yeah, my favorite thing about the Portland Trailblazers this year is definitely 100% their potential for a big three with a solid support system around them that should get them deep into the playoffs. I'm hoping that they have the best health, knock on wood, inshallah. I'm hoping that they are able to buy into Chauncey Billups' system that hopefully is less dependent upon their guards. And I'm looking for them to really shock a lot of people because when you got Damian Lillard and CJ McCollum and potentially all-star level Yusuf Nurkic, that team should go deep. That team should go deep. So with that, this is The Rock Never Stops with another episode on my favorite thing about your favorite team. Definitely like, subscribe, leave some comments. I definitely do respond to all the comments. And also, if you leave a suggestion on who you want me to do next, on what team you want me to take a look at, I'll definitely do that because that's how they got the John Collins video up there. All right, peace.
That was boring.